This conference will now be recorded.
Presented by Mehul Shah. Mehul Chandrakant Shah. If you are in Ghatkopar study circle, he need no introduction. But since this is a KDO CS study circle, we will be introducing him. First of all, the rules for the webinar. Please keep your mics and cameras on off. I, on behalf of KDO CS Association, welcomes you all for this webinar on recent amendments in TDS presented by CA Mehul Shah. Now a little bit of Mehul Shah. CA Mehul Chandrakant Shah. He is a BCom, FCA and DSA. He is presently partner of Shah and Shah Chartered Accountant firm. He has handled corporate law, income tax, audits. He has appeared before direct tax appellant. He is visiting faculty in SNDT College Ghatkopar for MCom and BCA for accounts and costing. He is visiting faculty in Institute of Company Secretaries of India for executive course for direct and indirect taxes. He was visiting faculty at Acharya College Chembur and SNDT College Matunga. He has contributed various publications at Ghatkopar CP Study Circle, including VDS on TDS, compiled with 150 FAQs, various case laws, tables, and circular. He has led various study circle meetings and seminar, National Conference of ICAI and WIRC. Acted as paper writer on paper case study under the Companies Act 1956 and other recent at RRC organized by Ghatkopar and Mulund Study Circle. Past convener of Ghatkopar CP Study Circle, WIRC. At present associated with Ghatkopar CP Study Circle, WIRC as committee member. He has been resource panel at Bangalore of ICAI for training programs. Was one of the co-opted member of publication and research and represented committee and editor board of WIRC of ICAI. Coordinated IT support for bank audit queries portal by ICAI for past 4 years. Acted as pre-review on behalf of ICAI as panel member. This is a brief introduction of Mehul Shah. Now I handed over the session to Mehul Shah. Mehul Shah, you can continue, sir. Mehul bhai.
Hello. Hello.
Hitesh bhai, I think there is some problem with Mehul bhai's speaker. I'm just solving it. 2 minutes.
Okay, no problem.
स्टार्ट करो जे पण कोई रिलीज है okay WhatsApp पे release so may I start Sarvik are you getting my voice on the computer? Yeah, you are audible. You can start. Okay, thank you. Good evening friends. At the outset I thank Ghanshyam bhai Lalka and Sarvik for having given this opportunity to me to speak with you people on recent amendments. Probably this is maybe the second occasion I am appearing before KDO as far as the meetings are concerned. Years back, I think I had appeared, I had spoken on one of the company law subjects or something, but it's years back. I really don't remember when Rajiv Luthia was actually coordinator. So today the topic that has been allotted to me is recent amendments, TDS, trust and presumptive taxation. By and large, what I've tried to cover is recent amendments in the sense whatever has been pronounced in the Finance Act 2020. Okay, and later whatever developments are there, I've tried to cover them also. Okay, so with this, we begin with the subject. It's a sort of refresher course because we all have learned this kind of budget provisions somewhere or the other in many budget meetings, but yet last 2 years have been such years wherein it has rather started since the last year, wherein we have not less than two to three budgets instead of only one budget. Last year we had around 3 amendments after the budget was actually passed, and the same is the thing in this year also. So maybe certain things have been learned by us. To an extent, we have something very new which we actually will be learning, and maybe we know, we don't know, we learn, we relearn, as the case may be. So we go ahead with this. Okay, the scope of presentation for today is amendments to TDS provisions by Finance Act 2020. Provisions applicable to trusts which are actually made applicable by the Finance Act 2020, and presumptive taxation. Certain issues I'm not covering typically presumptive taxation as the entire topic, but certain aspects in connection with Finance Act 2020 will be dealing with them. So the finance bill proposals which were there, Finance Act provisions, there have been many changes in the Finance Act as compared to the bill that was proposed, and subsequent developments that we actually have now. Okay, and we'll be discussing certain issues and the way outs too. So let's start with the TDS provisions at first. TDS has been is a topic which is very dear to my heart. In fact, I would concede that the first meeting informally that I had taken in my career was on TDS provisions way back in 1998, where we had a meeting at study group and I was asked to lead on the TDS provisions. I really did not know much of the provisions. I qualified in 1995, so I was much junior at that point in time. And then it was really an opportunity for me to learn TDS provisions. Eventually, in 2006, along with Rakesh Vora and Sailesh Doshi, I wrote a book on VDS on TDS, and that's how this journey of TDS provision has been. And it was very pleasing. Of course, of late, then I ventured into something else, and TDS provisions were actually kept apart. But yes, I still love this chapter of TDS. So first thing first, friends, TDS provisions, of course, you will say that what has to be done with taxation of perquisites. But yes, because there is a change in perquisite valuation, accordingly, there would be change in TDS provisions too. Compare it on the same line. So 17(2)(7 of the Income Tax Act has been amended. Okay, so you need to read this with section 192. Of course, let me tell you that there has been no amendment with this respect under section 192. But since 17(2)(7 is getting amended, resultantly section 192 will have to take care of this. So what used to happen was that earlier employers' contribution to superannuation fund, if it was not exceeding 1.5 lakh rupees, then it was not treated as perquisite. Now the Finance Act 2020 has actually made a huge change to this, and it says that limit of rupees 7,50,000 is set as an amount not treated as a perquisite. Okay, so limit of 7,50,000 on contribution to a recognized provident fund scheme under 80 CCD, that is pension National Pension Plan, and any approved superannuation fund. So in case, let's say an employee is getting a sum larger than 7.5 lakh rupees to his kitty by way of this kind of contributions in aggregate, then that amount will be treated as perquisite in the hands of employee. In the sense, let's say I'll give you an example, simple example. Let's say an employee is drawing 1 crore rupees by way of salary, okay, and 12% is the contribution of employer towards recognized provident fund. Okay, we leave this 80CCD, that is the National Pension Plan and Superannuation Fund for the time being. Now what happens is, because the contribution of employer is exceeding 7.5 lakh rupees, that is 12 lakh rupees, balance amount, that is 4.5 lakh rupees, will be treated as perquisite in the hands of concerned employee and will be brought to tax. Okay, so the employer will have to now consider that 4.5 lakh rupees also by way of income of the employee and deduct tax. So typically employee's salary would not be treated as 1 crore rupees, but it would be treated as 1 crore and 4 lakh something. Okay, so this is the provision that you need to actually take care of while valuation of perquisites and the deduction of tax at source under 192, that is on salaries. So that is first and foremost. Means usually, since there is no change in 192 per se, we tend to skip. We may skip this in mind. But since the valuation has perquisite valuation has undergone a change, you need to take care of this very carefully. And possibly in one of our clients' cases, we have already advised him that he may try to change his. Means ultimately now everything is on CTC basis, cost to company basis. So you have a director's cafeteria model kind of a thing, where you are told that cost to company would be an X amount, and now you treat yourself, you fix your salaries in such a manner that is cost efficient, tax efficient, as the case may be. So possibly in case if some a particular amount is withdrawn from this, and because see, ultimately in CTC concept, what happens is even employer's contribution is treated as part of the CTC. Okay, so if that is the case, then if that amount particularly can be taken to some non-taxable or exempt allowance, as the case may be, if possible, it can be structured that way. So one needs to actually take care of this and start working on this right now. Next amendment is with respect to sweat equity shares, section 191, read with section 192 1C. Now what is happening is that sweat equity shares basically are treated, in case if an employer is issuing sweat equity shares, then this particular sweat equity shares are treated as perquisite value in the hands of employee. I'm not going into the details of how the sweat equity shares are valued, because that is not the topic right now. But whatever value that is treated as perquisite in the hands of employee would be brought to tax in the year in which sweat equity shares are issued. But this particular provision has been brought in by the Finance Act 2020 for eligible startups, because what typically happens is eligible startups, they initially have very less amount of capital and fund flow at their hands. So ultimately, at that point in time, they are not in a position to actually compensate the employees with respect to adequate amount of salaries, but they are promised that this kind of shares are being issued to them, and at a later date they would benefit out of these shares. But at this point in time, they really don't have that kind of cash flow, neither the company nor the employee, to pay the tax up. In order to mitigate this kind of a hardship for eligible startups, the government has come out with a scheme wherein it has been stated that in case if an eligible startup is issuing sweat equity, and that is treated as perquisite in the hands of employee concerned in the financial year 2021. Okay, so that's not a case. It's not a case that these perquisites will not be taxed in this particular financial year 2021. What is provided is that the tax will be deferred for 48 months. Okay, so I'm just reading the provision. Income tax on such income shall be payable by the SSA within 14 days after the expiry of 48 months from the end of relevant assessment year. So typically what's happening is the amount will be treated as taxable in the hands of employee in this particular year, but the tax will not be payable by the employee in this particular year. It will be payable by the employee concerned after 48 months, or from the date of such sale of such specified securities or sweat equity by the SSE. In case if, let's say, after 2 years the employee concerned is selling those shares, in that case this tax will have to be paid within after 2 years. Or in case, let's say, after 3 years employee leaves the organization, then at that point in time the employee will have to pay the tax. So now primary responsibility is on the employer under 192(1)(c) to deduct tax at that point in time, either after expiry of 48 months or from the date of sale, or if the employee leaves the organization, then within 14 days from the triggering of this particular any of these events, the employer will have to deduct tax at source and pay to the central government. Okay. Per chance, if the employer is not able to deduct tax at source for any reason, XYZ reason, then section 191 is also amended, which states that in case if the employer does not deduct tax for any reason, then it will be obligation of the concerned employee to pay this tax on his own direct under section 191. Now section 156 also has been resultantly amended, which states that this particular demand of tax will appear in the employee's permanent account number as demand payable, and it will last till maximum 48 months. Okay, so this amount is basically going to be parked in the concerned employee's permanent account number, and the government will know that this amount is payable maximum within a period of 48 months. Okay, and section 140A is 140A is also amended, which states that in case for any reason the employer is not deducting tax at source under 192(1)(c), and the employee is liable to pay this tax under section 191 direct, then he has to make this payment by way of a self-assessment tax under section 140. And this is how the entire provision has been carried in the Finance Act 2020. Next provision with respect to TDS is dividends under section 194. Earlier we had section 1150, wherein the company was liable to pay tax at the rate of 15% plus surcharge cess on reverse mechanism, and it used to go up to 20%. Now the dividend itself has been made taxable with effect from April 1, 2020. Okay, so for financial year 2021, entire dividend is going to be taxed. Okay, resultantly section 1150 has been made inoperative, and all the dividends across the board, that is 222A or 222B, 222C, D or E as the case may be, are now taxable as normal income of the concerned shareholder. Okay, and accordingly the tax will have to be paid by the employer, by the concerned shareholder. Okay, so the rate of TDS in this case under 194 is applicable at the rate of 10% in case if the concerned shareholder is a resident, and in case if the concerned shareholder is a non-resident, then under section 195 of the Income Tax Act 1961, the company will have to deduct 20% as tax, 20% plus surcharge plus cess as is applicable as tax at source under 195. So principally section 194 is applicable only to the resident Indians. Okay, in case if you have some shareholders who are non-resident shareholders, okay, then section 195 will come in play, and the rate of tax which has been made applicable is 20%. And for this you can go to schedule 3, schedule 2, missing on that part 2 of schedule 3. Part 2 of schedule 3, you will get this 20% rate for company SSs also, that is foreign companies or foreign shareholders as the case may be. Okay, As far as 194 is concerned, the threshold limit is 5,000 rupees for residents. So in case if your dividend is less than 5,000 rupees, then the company need not deduct tax at source. But in case of non-residents, from rupee 1, the shareholder will have to apply, the company will have to apply 20% tax on the entire amount without any threshold limit. That is what the one needs to actually take care of. Okay. Then, if you remember, before a couple of years, Section 222E, there was an amendment with this respect that in case if deemed dividend is taxed in the hands of concerned shareholders, in the sense that let us say you are a substantial shareholder and you have been given loan or advance, as the case may be, by the company concerned. Okay, then instead of the shareholder paying tax on this amount, the company was liable to pay DDT under Section 1150 at the rate of 30% plus applicable surcharge and cess, as the case may be. So it was almost going to 34%. Now instead of that, even that, since an entire 115O has been made inoperative, and even the dividend under Section 222 is brought to tax as normal income. Now you don't have to actually pay dividend distribution tax on this 222E component, and everything comes under Section 194. Next is Section 1034 is suitably amended not to double tax the dividends, in the sense what was actually feared. Let's say the budget came on to 1st February 2020, wherein they proposed that dividend would be taxed from 1st April 2020. So 2021 financial year dividend is going to be taxed, and almost all the companies were trying to pay dividends as interim dividends by 31st of March 2020, for the simple reason that because of the surcharge element, let's say your income is more than 5 crore rupees, then your surcharge was as high as 37%, and the effective tax rate was as high as around 43%. So companies were contemplating that why not to pay dividends right now and pay 20% distribution tax. And that is how it was actually planned. At that point in time, people were fearing that, let's say the company is paying tax as of company is declaring dividend, let's say on 31st of March. Okay, and within 14 days from that day, within 30 days, not 14 days, they have to pay distribution tax, and within 30 days they have to pay the dividend to the concerned shareholder. Okay, now let's say that 31st March is the date on which dividend is declared, and 30th April is the date on which actual dividend is paid to the concerned shareholder. Now both years are different, and the company pays dividend distribution tax by 14th of April 2020. But it was a fear that the shareholder would also be asked to pay the tax, because although the dividend pertains to the earlier year, now since it has been received by the concerned shareholder in financial year 2021, it would be brought to tax in the hands of shareholder also. So 1034 has been amended to bring it very clearly that in this kind of a case where company has paid the distribution tax under 115O in the financial year 1920 itself, and the dividends are received in 2021 financial year, that particular dividend will not be brought to tax. So it's a welcome provision. Now, certain amendments concerning Section 44AB. Okay, we have, these are linked to 44AB. So 194A interest, 194C contract, 194H commission, 194I rent, and 194J professional fees. There have been certain amendments which are common amendments, and there have been certain amendments which are uncommon or independent amendments. So let's take up the common amendments first. For this, we need to understand what Section 44AB has undergone a change. Section 44AB has undergone, I would deliberately put the entire section. Usually, I don't prefer to bring the entire text to the presentation, but now since these provisions are very important and we are very new to us, I'm just trying to reproduce those provisions. Section 44AB, any person carrying on business, if his total sales, turnover, or gross assets, as the case may be, exceed 1 crore rupees, or was the word, or profession 50 lakh rupees. Now this or has been deleted and this red portion has been inserted. It provided that in case of a person whose aggregate of all amounts received, including received for sales, turnover or gross receipts during the previous year in cash, does not exceed 5% of the said amount. So in case if your, let's say, sale is 100 rupees, means I'm just giving a simple example. If your sale is 100 rupees, your cash sales or cash receipts, as the case may be, apart from your contra entries, in case if you withdraw cash from bank, that would not be treated as actual receipt. Okay, but supposingly somebody else has given you cash, okay, for cash sales, or some debtor of yours has actually paid you cash, as the case may be, then that particular amount cannot exceed 5% of the entire sales. Okay, and aggregate of all payments made, including incurred for expenditure in cash during the previous year, does not exceed 5% of the entire expenditure. So on sales, on income side, it should not exceed 5%. On expense side, like purchases plus all expenses together, the cash element should not exceed 5%. In that case, this clause shall have application as if for the words 1 crore rupees, the words 5 crore rupees has been substituted. Okay. Now we already have an issue on presumptive taxation on this, but that we will take up at a later time when we deal with presumptive taxation. At the moment, what are the amendments with respect to this under 40 in TDS provisions? Now it has been provided, these are common amendments, that 194A CHIJ, they have provided, earlier it was, the provision was that the monetary limit specified under clause A or clause B of section 44AB. So earlier the provision was that in case if you exceed the monetary limit prescribed under clause A or B of 44AB, then you are required to deduct tax at source under 194A or 194C, H, I or J. Now instead of that, what it's now they have brought in the particular limits in the concerned section itself. So under 194A, they have provided that in case if your turnover is more than 1 crore rupees, or if you are in business, if you are in profession, then if your gross receipts from profession are more than 50 lakh rupees, in that case you are liable to deduct tax at source under 194A. Same way 194C, that is contract, 194H commission, 194I, that is rent, and 194J, that is professional. So why this has been brought into statute book with in this way is for the simple reason that clause A has a particular limit of this 5 crore rupees. Okay, so it should not be confused with 5 crore rupees. So that's the reason why they are making it very clear that in case your turnover exceeds 1 crore rupees, then you are liable to deduct tax at source under this particular sections, even if you are not liable to get your accounts audited under section 44AB, because of the simple reason that your turnover is within 5 crore rupees and you are complying with those 5% cash element on receipt side and payment side as well. So you are not supposed to get your accounts audited, yet you will be liable to deduct tax at source under 194A CHIJ. This is the major change. Means of course this was it was always there. Even otherwise it was there. Even earlier this kind of a provision was there, that in case if your turnover exceeds 1 crore rupees, you are liable to deduct tax at source, irrespective of the fact whether you are liable to get your accounts audited under section 44AB or not. So now this is what the change is. Otherwise, the position remains same. Now next is next we come to our independent amendments for these sections. 194A. Now 194A, there are certain exceptions carved out that stating that this particular section of tax deduction will not applicable in certain cases, which is covered by subsection 3. Okay, interest paid to some persons, wherein it is provided also that in case of payee being a senior citizen, the provisions of this clause, subclause A or B or C shall have effect as if the words 40,000 rupees, the words 50,000 rupees had been substituted. Ordinarily, the bank, in case if a bank is paying interest, it is not required to deduct tax up to 40,000 rupees. But in case of senior citizens, the amount is 50,000 rupees. But what used to happen that non-resident senior citizens were exempt, were not covered by this particular aspect, and it was stated that for the purpose of this clause, senior citizen means an individual resident in India who is of the age of 65 years or more at any time during the previous year. So what used to happen was that the bank was, even if the person, there is a senior citizen but he's a non-resident, so the banks were liable to deduct tax at source of 40,000 rupees, and there was no 50,000 limit applicable for those senior citizens. Now this explanation particularly has been removed, and in view of this, the banks are not required to deduct tax at source in case of senior citizens who are non-residents up to rupees 50,000. Of course, it's a small benefit given to those senior citizens by of 10,000 rupees only, not a great amendment, but yet it is there. Next again is 194A. Again, clause 3, to such income credited or paid to any banking company. So this provision, 194A3 subclause 3, this the banking, in case if a bank is making payment to a banking company to which Banking Regulation Act applies, or any cooperative society in the business of banking, okay, in case if interest is paid to these people, then any financial corporation established by the central or provincial act, life insurance corporation, unit trust, and any company or cooperative society carrying on business of insurance, and such other institutions, associations, etc. Okay, now they are saying that no notification under this subclause shall be issued on or after 1st April 2020. So whatever has been provided for these people up to 31st March 2020 will be the law, and now no more relaxation or anything will be provided under this clause. Of course, we are not concerned with this much, but yet this is there as a provision. Another provision that has come in under 194A is, it's a new proviso added after exceptions. It used to read this way, that interest payment to a member by a cooperative society, not being a cooperative bank, or by cooperative society to another cooperative society, there was no requirement to TDS. So I'll give you an example that, let's say there is a cooperative bank and there is a cooperative housing society. Cooperative housing society has deposit with the cooperative bank, okay, then it was not liable to deduct tax at source because of this exemption. Okay, so since both are cooperative societies, earlier even the TDS provisions were not applicable even to members. So suppose, let's say there's a cooperative bank of which I am a shareholder, and interest is paid to me by the concerned bank, then there was no requirement to deduct tax at source in my case because I am a member. Now, before some, it was stated that concerned cooperative bank, the bank is liable to deduct tax at source in case if your interest exceeds the particular amount. Earlier it was 10,000, now it is 40,000 rupees. What has been brought out is that in case if a cooperative bank is paying interest to another cooperative society, in that case, if the total sales, gross receipts or turnover of the cooperative society, that is the bank, right now for our purpose we consider as bank, exceeds 50 crore rupees during the financial year immediately preceding the financial year, in that case the cooperative bank will have to cooperative housing society. Okay, so in case if the turnover of the cooperative bank is more than 50 crore rupees, and there is an interest payment more than 40,000 rupees to the concerned cooperative housing society, then the cooperative bank is liable to deduct tax at source under section 194A. And in case of senior citizens, cooperative society can deduct tax after the threshold of 50,000 is attained. Another power has been acquired by the central government, which states that in case if they feel, they will notify certain payments on which tax is not required to be deducted under 194A. Now we come to independent amendment with respect to section 194C, that is contract. The provision went this way, that work shall include manufacturing or supplying product. This is the definition of work. It shall include manufacturing or supplying a product according to the requirements or specification of a customer by using material purchased from such customer, but does not include manufacturing or supplying a product according to the requirements or specification of customer by using material purchased from person other than such customer. So let us say that Mr. A and Mr. B are there, where we consider a situation where Mr. A is a contractor and Mr. B is principal. Mr. B has given contract to Mr. A to manufacture certain things. Now Mr. B says that you will have to use my material, raw material only, and Mr. A has to purchase those raw materials from Mr. B. In that case, it was a case that the person was required to deduct tax at source on the entire amount. Okay. Now, in case if Mr. A is working on the specification of and the TDS would be on the entire amount, that is on the purchase amount also. This is what the crux of the matter is. Okay. Now let us say that Mr. A is buying the material, is obliged to work according to the specification of Mr. B, the principal, but is not obliged to buy the material from Mr. B. He is buying those materials from any XYZ as the case may be. Then Mr. B has to deduct tax only on the amount of this contract and not on the purchase amount. Okay, that was the entire crux. Now they have brought an amendment which states that in case if the there is a group concern of Mr. B, the principal, which is a 48(2)(b) party, okay, which is a related party for Mr. B, and if Mr. A is obliged to purchase goods not from Mr. A is obliged to purchase goods not from Mr. B, but the group concern of Mr. B, then also it would be treated, since that party is an associate of such customer, entire TDS provision would be applicable on the purchase amount also. That is the amendment that has come into effect. Next is 194J, professional fees. Usually 10% was the case for professional fees and technical services fees, okay, and the royalties, of course. Now the amendment that has been brought out is that instead of 10%, only 2% of the tax will have to be deducted at source on the fees for technical services, into bracket not being professional services, or royalty, where such royalty is in the nature of consideration for sale, distribution or exhibition of cinematographic films, in the sense that normal professional fee you will deduct 10% as tax at source. On technical services fees, only 2% will have to be affected. Now what happens now let us understand what is this technical services fee. They have stated that technical services fee would have the same meaning as given in explanation 2 to section 917, which I am just reading. Fees for technical services means any consideration, including any lump sum consideration for rendering any managerial, technical or consultancy services, including the provision of services of technical or other personnel, but does not include consideration for any construction, assembly, mining or like project undertaken by the recipient, or consideration which would be income of the recipient chargeable under the head salaries. So in case if it is salary, then naturally 192 provisions will apply and not 194J. So technical services fee is basically a fee which is for rendering managerial, technical, consultancy services, but again it should not be in the nature of professional services. Okay, so there is a lot of confusion, in the sense the fraternity in our profession has been discussing that whether our audit fees per se would be treated as professional fee or technical services fee. Because if it is a technical service, because even audit, actually I'll come to that as to how audit is technical. But in case the issue here is that whether I can get the benefit of 2% reduce tax at source or not is the issue here. Okay. Now there were so many litigations actually, and I'm just referring to this. See, this is the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India's website, wherein they have stated the technical standard means accounting standards issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, statement of standard auditing practices, framework of for the preparation and presentation of financial statements, statement issued by Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, compliance of the guidance note, notification direction issued, and compliance of the provisions of various relevant statutes. Okay, so if this particular definition is considered, then even a chartered accountant is rendering technical services, and if this is considered, then we should now be able to claim that we should be having TDS of 2% and not 10%. That is the argument right now going on in the professional fraternity. Okay, now the litigation will come to, and then we will conclude whether chartered accountant service is for technical services or not. Litigations, one was TDS2 CIT TDS2 versus Time Global Broadcasting, and the issue was whether placement fees, carriage fees paid by SSC company engaged in the business of distribution of television channels to cable operators were payment for work under 194C or 194 fees for technical services under 194J. So basically the issue here was that in the clients are always, the SSCs were always trying to say that this is not technical service fee or professional fee, it is work. And the officers used to say that no, these are consultancy technical services fee and it is 194J. Okay. Another case was CIT versus CIT TDS versus Asian Heart Institute. The dispute arose whether the payment towards annual maintenance contract in respect of supply various specialties hospital equipment by the SSC were 194C or 194J. Another case is CIT versus Reliance Life Insurance, wherein the SSC insurance company made payments for services hired for various works such as storage of data, scanning of documents, processing charges, call center operations, etc. SSC was required to deduct tax under 194C again or 194J. ITO said it is technical fee, services fee of 194J is applicable, and SSC said it is 194C. Now, next case is CIT versus Star Entertainment India. The issue again was 194C or 194J. Okay. Now there were two decisions. See, the issue here is that let's say the assessing officer says that it is 194J applicable and your deducted tax under 194C at the rate of 2%. Your showed deducted tax at the rate of 8%. Okay. And accordingly, I will disallow the entire purchases, entire payment, or maybe proportionate payment as the case may be. Okay, so on short payments, the people were actually suffering disallowances. This is where the litigation was going on. Kolkata High Court in case of SK Tekriwal held that even if there is a short provision, short deduction of tax at source, there cannot be disallowance under section 40A1A for the simple reason that section particular section does not say that it has to, the deduction has to be made in accordance with the section. It has to be made in accordance with the chapter. So let's say if I have deducted tax at the rate of 2% under 194C instead of 10% at the rate of under section 194J, yet I had complied with the provisions of chapter 17B. Only thing is whether it was 2% or 10% was a matter of interpretation. Okay, so Kolkata High Court said that no disallowance can be made under this particular provision, that is 40A1A, whereas Kerala High Court ruled otherwise. PVS Memorial Hospital, where it held that if there is a short deduction of tax at source, then the amount can be put to disallowance under section 40A1A. Okay, for invoking wrong provision of law. Okay, so again, so first controversy which was going on whether was with respect to whether the SSC is in default, SSC in default or not, and another litigation which was going on was with respect to the disallowance under section 40A1A. In order to overcome the entire difficulty and litigation, this amendment has been brought, and the explanatory memorandum states that it is noticed that there are large number of litigations on the issue of short deductions of tax creating SSC in default, where SSC deducts tax under section 194C, while tax officers claim that tax should have been deducted under 194J. Therefore, to reduce litigation, it is proposed to reduce rate of TDS in 194J in case of fees for technical services other than professional services to 2% from existing 10%. The TDS rate in other cases under 194J would remain same at 10%. This is verbatim memorandum, explanatory memorandum. So coming back to the chartered accountant's fee, let's say I'm giving consultancy on accounting standards, Ind AS, Indian accounting standards, okay. And now Ind AS, admittedly, is a very technical subject, okay. Can I claim that I am providing technical services fee and accordingly I should suffer only 2% deduction and not 10% deduction? In my personal view, we cannot contend because it still remains a professional fee, where the issue that has been brought under light in amendment is that where there is a possibility that whether it is work or whether it is professional fee. So a kind of works contract provisions which are there in the GST terms or VAT regime, what we used to call the works contract. Those kind of contracts are there wherein material is also involved and the labor is also involved, or maybe some professional fees also, or technical services are also involved. In that kind of a case only you can contend, because of this memorandum which has been given, that one it's technical service. So if it is a plain vanilla kind of professional fee like auditing service or consultancy on Indian accounting standards, as the case may be, then it will be very difficult for us to contend that it is a technical services fee and accordingly only 2% tax is required. We chartered accountants are still, to my mind, are covered by professional fee at the rate of 10% under 194J. Next is 194K income in respect of units. Okay, now any mutual fund which is giving income with respect to mutual fund, the units of mutual fund under section 1023D, or means it is rather distributing any income, okay, in respect of units of mutual fund or units of administrator of specified undertaking or units from specified company, as the case may be, then that particular mutual fund will have to deduct tax at source at the rate of 10%. So dividend distribution, income distribution, whatever is the case may be. Now redemption, to my mind, would not be covered here, okay, unless and until the reduction is including the dividend portion or the income distribution portion is a different thing. So long as, let's say it's a growth fund, okay, wherein I've invested 100 rupees and I've got 125. On 25 rupees only there would be TDS, okay, not otherwise. Or wherever the income is distributed separately by the concerned mutual fund, there would be deduction of tax at the rate of 10%, and the threshold limit is 5,000 rupees. Otherwise, on normal redemptions which are there, to my mind, there would not be any deduction of tax at source under 194. The limit is 5,000, as I said, up to, in case if the income distribution happens to be less than 5,000 rupees, then the provisions of 194K are not applicable. Next is income of non-residents. There are 3 amendments with respect to 194 LBA, LC, LD, but all are with respect to the finance, IFSC and all. So the practical utility of these sections is very limited. So considering the audience that I feel I'm addressing to right now, these provisions by and large would not be applicable to our clients, and I'm skipping this particular sections in order to devote more time to other things. But these are the provisions which are undergone a change, and accordingly we'll have to take care of this. In case if you have a client who is registered with IFCA and has taken some foreign loan, etc., and in that case interest is paid to the non-residents, these provisions are there with that respect, and accordingly you will have to consider those. These provisions were already there. There has been amendment to these sections. I'm just skipping those. Next is 194 and payment of certain amounts in cash. Okay, now this provision is basically it was in case if somebody is withdrawing cash, this is a new provision. If somebody is withdrawing cash from bank, whether it is cooperative or otherwise, and that sum happens to be more than 1 crore rupees. So if your cash withdrawals are more than 1 crore rupees from your account, and any of the accounts, like let's say you are a company and you have a current account, you have a CCA account, you have an ODA account, as the case may be, withdrawal in aggregate from all these accounts from the entire bank, like different branches also, because now all the banks are under core banking solution only. So they will be able to link entire accounts. So if you withdraw more than 1 crore rupees from all the accounts in aggregate, or more than that, in that case, the bank or the post office will deduct tax at the rate of 2% of the sum exceeding rupees 1 crore rupees. So first 1 crore rupees will not be brought to tax, but let's say you withdraw in totally 1.5 crore rupees during the year, then on 50 lakh rupees they will have to deduct 2% as tax at source and they pay to the government under section 194N. Okay, and now in case for any reason the bank, the concerned borrower, concerned not borrower but concerned company who is holding accounts with these banks, has not filed its returns for last 3 consecutive years. Okay, in that case the banks are required to deduct tax. In case if the withdrawals are up to 20 lakh rupees, then there is no tax required to be deducted. In case if the withdrawals are more than 20 lakh but up to 1 crore rupees, then 2% tax deduction is there. And if the withdrawals are above 1 crore rupees, then deduction at the rate of 5% will have to be effected in this kind of a case. So in case if the concerned company has not filed the returns of income for 3 consecutive years, then the higher rate of tax has been prescribed under 194N. So typically now the banks will have to ask the clients who are actually withdrawing more cash to submit the income tax returns also, whether they have filed the returns or not, in order to comply with the provisions of this particular section. Next is 194O, e-commerce operators. This provision was to come into effect from 1st April 2020, but now it has been deferred. I'm coming to that. So in case if you have e-commerce operator and e-commerce participant, now I will take an example of Flipkart and XYZ company who is, let's say, computer dealer who is registered on the Flipkart. Okay, as a Flipkart or Amazon, as the case may be, are e-commerce operators because they have a website, they have a facility wherein the participants are able to place their products, demonstrate their products, and the sale happens on the website. Okay, so if let's say I go to amazon.com or amazon.in, as the case may be, and there is one dealer, Star Enterprises. I'm giving an example. Star Enterprises are actually, let's say, dealing in computer peripherals items, and I'm buying peripheral items through Star Enterprises. Now, what happens typically in this kind of a cases? One is that I have to make payment directly to Star Enterprise because it is payment on delivery. Okay, if it is a payment on delivery, then when the courier comes to my home with, let's say I bought a laptop, I will make the payment at that point in time, and the Star Enterprise will get this money directly from me. Another way is I make the payment to Amazon.in, and Amazon.in will in turn make the payment to Star Enterprise, which is e-commerce participant. Okay, in both these cases, now it has been provided that whether Star Enterprise gets this money directly from me or Star Enterprise gets money from Amazon.in, as the case may be. Since it's an there is a sale of goods or provision of service, of course this is not restricted to goods only, even service contracts are also considered or covered. So let's say, giving an example, I'm a chartered accountant, I am giving advice. Now I can give advice or I cannot give advice under professional ethics is different thing, but let's say I'm giving advice on advice through Amazon.in, okay, as the case may be, and I am e-commerce participant, and it is facilitated by e-commerce operator through digital or electronic facility or platform, and the amount, that is amount of sale consideration or service consideration, is more than 5 lakh rupees. In that case, the e-commerce operator has to deduct tax at the rate of 1% on the sale consideration or the service consideration. Okay. In case if it is less than 5 lakh rupees, then you don't have to worry about it. Otherwise, if it is more than 5 lakh rupees, then 1% TDS. And in case the e-commerce participant does not have permanent account number, okay, in that case TDS will have to be effected at the rate of 5%. That is under there is a amendment under section 206AA. Right. Now let's say there is a direct payment received by the e-commerce participant, then that payment will be deemed to be amount credited or paid to the e-commerce operator to the e-commerce participant. And accordingly, what happens is, let's say e-commerce participant has got this entire money in its hands, and e-commerce participant has to give commission to e-commerce operator only. Okay. Yet e-commerce operator will have to not only collect its commission but also the TDS amount on at the rate of 1% from the participant, because it is a deemed credit given by the e-commerce operator to the e-commerce participant. So Star Enterprise will have to, let's say 100 rupees is the value of goods. Okay. Commission of Amazon is let's say 3 rupees. 3% is let's say 3 rupees. So Amazon will have to, the Star Enterprise will have to pay 3 rupees to Amazon by way of commission. Okay. And Star Enterprise will also have to pay 1 rupee towards the TDS, which Amazon India will pay to the government under section 194O. In case if Amazon has got this entire 100 rupees, then Amazon will deduct 1%, pay to the government, deduct 3% its commission, and pay 96 rupees to the Star Enterprise. This is how this will work. Okay. So Star Enterprise will get only 96 rupees as a cash flow. Whether if it receives 100 rupees, 3 rupees plus 1 rupee towards TDS will have to be paid. And otherwise, if Amazon is paying, then 96 rupees and 1 rupee will be paid by way of TDS by Amazon Enterprise. This is what the section is all about. Okay. Now, one more provision which has been given is that e-commerce participant not to deduct tax on commission paid to e-commerce operator under 194H, because there is a specific provision that since this TDS is happening under 194O by e-commerce participant to e-commerce operator. The e-commerce operator to e-commerce participant. That is, Amazon.in is deducting tax of Star. Now, Star is not required to deduct tax under 194H on the commission element of Amazon. That is the relief that has been given under this section, for the simple reason that the transaction is actually recorded. See, the intention of government is not to gather tax, but this kind of transactions were not reported only by the people. That's the reason if one of the parties is exposed to TDS, then the other party is automatically exposed to TDS. That is the precise reason why government has stated that now on commission element you don't have to deduct tax, and only operator, that is Amazon, will deduct tax under 194O. And provision of this subsection will not apply to any amount received or receivable by the e-commerce operator for advertisement contracts. Okay, so those advertisement contracts would not be covered here. If they are covered by equalization levy, as the case may be, it's a different thing, but 194O will not come into play as far as the advertisement contracts are concerned. Then we come to next 194M. Of course, this is not flowing out of Finance Act 2020, but it is flowing out of Finance Act 2019. But since it's a very new provision, I have thought to cover this particular amendment. It has come into effect from 1/9/2019. Individual or HUF who are not covered by 194C or 194J, 194H, or I'm missing 194H. It should not be 194, but 194H and 194J. Personal payments for contract, commission, brokerage, as the case may be. Okay, so let's say I'm getting my house renovated. I've appointed the interior designer, okay, whom I'm paying amount more than 50 lakh rupees, because the person has to get my what you call he has to get the material also, he has to get the labor also, he has to give me designing also, everything together. So as far as my furnishing is concerned, it will be covered by 194C. In case if I have to pay some commission also, let's say the same person, the same interior designer is also acting as a broker, estate broker, and through him only I have purchased the house, giving an example. So I have to pay him brokerage also. Okay. So I have to pay brokerage, I have to pay commission, I have to pay contract amount, and I have to also pay fees for designing. That is 194J, because interior designer again is a professional, notified professional. Okay. So if I'm making payment exceeding 50 lakh rupees under for all these things like contract, commission, brokerage, professional fees, in that case I have to deduct tax at the rate of 5%. But I don't have to obtain tax deduction account number. I can make the payment under form number 26QC or 26QD. I'm missing on the form number, but I have to make the payment in that form without having TDS number. Another amendment in 2019 that has come is insurance policy. In case if your insurance premium is more than 10% of the sum assured, then that particular insurance policy is not an exempt policy, and accordingly any proceeds that you receive out of that will have to be, you will have to pay tax on that amount. Okay, and the insurance company was required to deduct tax at the rate of 1%. Now that tax with effect from 1/9/2019 is increased to 5% instead of 1%. So these are the two amendments pertaining to last year, but I have considered as they are recent amendments to our TDS provisions. Then 197A for lower deduction of tax, in case the person is covered by 194M. 194M is basically contractor or professional as the case may be, or 194O, that is e-commerce participant. They can approach the assessing officer for lower deduction of tax certificate, and if the officer is giving lower deduction of tax certificate, then that person can give it to the e-commerce operator, and according, or the person who's paying amount as the case may be, and that lower deduction amount will be considered as the tax deductible rate of tax deduction. Now 203AA is basically omitted with effect from June 1st, 2020. So basically 26AS now will not be issued. Instead of that, they will issue ITS. When we go for scrutiny, the income tax officer gives us the ITS. Okay, that ITS we are asked to reconcile. Same ITS will be given to us. So now we will not get information only with respect to TDS, but in case if some property transactions are done or anything else is done, we'll get that information also upfront. So it's a very good move, nothing wrong with that. Ultimately, whether it is 26AS form or some other form, so long as I'm getting the information, and I also know upfront that the government has this kind of information, okay, that I have entered into this kind of transactions, okay, in that case I am also well guarded. I also know I'll not be inclined to suppress certain transactions. Honestly, it's a welcome move, so that it's a transparent system working, that over you, the SSE also knows what department knows, and the department knows what SSE has. Okay, so nothing wrong with that. So this kind of course the form will have to be notified, but 26AS will not be available from June 1st, 2020. For finance assessment year 2021, it will be anyways, it will be available. Next is 206C. Now again we come to Finance Act 2020. 206C LRS, liberalized remittance scheme, and foreign tour payment. In case the provisions are covered by section 206C1G, effective earlier it was 1st April 2020. Now that has been deferred to 1st October 2020. So in case if I go to the bank, let's say I want to make some foreign investment, which is, let's say, 10 lakh rupees, for which I'm going for liberalized remittance scheme under LRS of RBI. One can remit up to $2.5 lakh US dollars as the LRS amount. Okay, but the income tax act says that in case if you make an LRS up to 7 lakh rupees, then there would not be any tax collection at source. But if your amount of LRS is exceeding 7 lakh rupees, let's say 10 lakh rupees, then on 3 lakh rupees, the bank will have to collect 5%, okay, from the buyer of exchange towards the tax. Okay, so I'm paying 10 lakh rupees to the bank for LRS for remitting 10 lakh rupees outside India. On 3 lakh rupees, the bank will collect 5% tax from me. Okay, and in case if I'm going in for foreign tour operator, let's say I'm going to Hina Tours and Travels for foreign travel. Okay, and my package is entire family is, let's say, 6 lakh rupees. It is less than 7 lakh rupees. It is 6 lakhs rupees, 2 lakh rupees per head, or 1.5 lakh rupees per head as the case may be. Means it's a small sum. I'm going very near. Okay, yet Hina Tours and Travels will have to collect tax on the entire 6 lakh rupees at the rate of 5%. So the threshold of this 7 lakh rupees is not applicable for tours and travels. Threshold of 7 lakh rupees is available only in case if I'm going in for LRS more than 7 lakh rupees. Okay, right? So the buyer, the foreign tour operator will have to collect tax right from rupee 1, but the bank will collect tax only on the amount in excess of 7 lakh rupees. Okay, and in case, let's say I'm remitting the amount for education of my child abroad. Okay, and I've taken education loan also. Okay, in that case, the AD has to collect only 0.5% on the amount of more than 7 lakh rupees. Let's say I'm remitting 10 lakh rupees towards education cost of my daughter abroad. Okay, then what is paid in excess is only 3 lakh rupees. On 3 lakh rupees, I have to pay tax, or the bank has to collect tax. Okay, but only the bank need not collect 5% tax. In this case, bank will have to collect only 0.5% tax because I have taken an education loan. Let's say I have not taken education loan and I'm funding 10 lakh rupees out of my own resources, then the bank will collect 5% from me, not 0.5%. That is the provision. Okay, and in case, let's say I'm buying exchange from the bank for my foreign travel. Okay, then the bank will have to deduct tax right from rupee 1. I forgot to mention that. Okay, so whether I'm making payment to the tour operator for foreign travel or I'm making payment to the bank for foreign travel, as the case may be, the bank will deduct tax, means bank will collect tax, or the tour operator will collect tax right from rupee 1. Okay, LRS 7 lakh rupees is the threshold. Okay, now for any reason, let's say the tour operator is collecting tax on this transaction. Okay, in that case, the bank, the AD, that is authorized dealer, is not required to collect tax on the portion of foreign tour package. This is what the provision is. Next is no TDS if the buyer is liable to deduct tax at source. Let's say I'm a company. Okay, and I'm making some payment under LRA. So let's say I'm basically an individual, but under tax audit. Okay, and I'm liable to deduct tax at source under 194J, 194A is the case may be. Not related to LRS, completely on anything else in any other section. But since I'm already covered by an audit, and I'm required to deduct tax under the provisions of law, then TCS provisions will not be applicable in my case. Okay, so to that extent there is a relief, and there is an exemption given to remittances by central government, state government, foreign embassies, etc. Now another section is 206C, sale of goods. A seller, in case if a seller who's having more than 10 crore rupees worth turnover and who is selling goods more than 50 lakh rupees to a particular buyer, Okay. In that case, the seller has to collect tax from the buyer is the provision basically. Okay. So a sale, I'll just read the provision. A seller whose total sales receipts are more than 10 crore rupees, who receives any amount as consideration for sale of any goods of the value or aggregate of such value exceeding 50 lakh rupees in any previous year, other than the goods being exported out of India or goods covered by section 194 means 206C 1F or 1G as the case may be, shall at the time of receipt of such amount collect from the buyer a sum equal to 0.1% of sale consideration exceeding 50 lakh rupees as the income tax. Okay. So basically this particular provision applies only in case if the seller has a turnover of more than 10 crore rupees. The seller is selling goods more than 50 lakh rupees to somebody. In that case, that some seller has to collect 0.01% tax from the concerned buyer and pay to the government. But the provision applies at the time of receipt of money. So it's not a case of credit or payment, whichever is earlier. So let's say I've made the sale on, let's say, the 1st of October, but the buyer is making the payment on 1st of January. Then the TCS liability will arise only on 1st January because the payment has been received by me on 1st January and not on 1st October. So I am not going out of my pocket as far as this TCS is concerned. Okay. And in case if there is no permanent account number of the buyer with you, in that case the TCS will be at the rate of 1%. That is under section 206CC. Next is provided further that provisions of this subsection shall not apply if the buyer is liable to deduct tax at source. Now let's say there is a works contract type of case, okay, wherein the buyer is making payment and deducting tax. Let's say buyer is making has given a printing contract, okay, and buyer is making payment for printing. Then buyer will be deducting tax of the seller of the printer. Okay. If this transaction, in this case, if buyer is deducting tax at source, then the seller need not collect tax at source. This is what the provision is. So if the intention is the transaction should be reported whether by the buyer or by the seller, as the case may be. The transaction should not go scot free. That is the intention. But very fundamental thing is actually a person who is having turnover more than 10 crore and the person who is buying more than 50 lakh rupees is anyways going to file the return of income. So practically there is no advantage of this kind of a section. Actually what could have been done was amount less than 50 lakh rupees. If you are actually covering for TCS, then those transactions which are actually skipping the site of government would have been covered, but now they have gone actually other way around. Anyways, as the be it as maybe, this is the provision. Next is sale of goods. The certain issues that I have taken with respect to this. Let's say sale is effected in earlier year but realized in current year. Let's say sale is effected in financial year 1920, or let's say financial year 2021 only, but let's say before 1st of October 2020 it has been effected, but the realization has happened in after 1st of October 2020. Then whether TCS liability would be there or not is the issue. To my mind, TCS liability will go on the receipts on the receipt basis. So once you cross the limit of 50 lakh rupees, whether it belongs to earlier year or this year, as the case may be, you will have to collect tax and pay to the government. Okay. Now sale is effected in current year but realized in the next year. Then the TCS liability will apply in the next year. Now let's say this year my turnover, my sale is 50 lakh, more than 50 lakh rupees. Okay. Next year the sale is less than 50 lakh rupees and I'm getting the payment, then probably the TCS provision would not apply, because unless and until 50 lakh rupees sale is effected, the provision does not apply, because it's not basically clearly worded. This is what the issue is. Okay. Another is buyer is giving advance payment and the wordings are receives any amount as consideration for sale of goods. Okay. So typically it's a case of advance payment where the sale has actually not happened. Sale is not concluded. So on advance payment, to my mind, there would not be any TCS. Only when the sale happens, at that point in time, you will have to actually pay the amount of TCS. Then let's say buyer is making on account payment. Let's say you have sold him goods worth rupees 1 crore. Okay. And the buyer is making payment of 10 lakh rupees or maybe 20 lakh rupees. Okay. On 1 crore rupees, let's say GST element itself is 18 lakh rupees. Okay. Then whether you would appropriate this 10 lakh or 20 lakh rupees towards sale consideration or GST or TCS itself, because you have to collect this amount from the buyer. So you will have to collect 1 crore plus 18 lakh GST plus 1% or 0.1% of sale consideration. Okay, from the buyer. So can I appropriate? First thing first, I should not be going out of pocket. So can I say that the amount of 10 lakh rupees or 20 lakh rupees which I have got, I'm appropriating that amount towards GST first, then I will appropriate that amount towards TCS, then the buyer may be paying interest on late payment, then I would appropriate that amount to interest on late payment. The buyer may also be making payment of transportation or insurance. I'll appropriate that amount towards that. And then at last time, whatever amount is there, I will appropriate towards sale consideration. Can I do so? Can I do? Can't I do so? I really don't know how this provision will operate. But these are the issues we will have to think over and get some solution. I don't have, actually, honestly, I don't have any upfront solution to this issue. Even I'll have to think on this. But some sort of clarification or representation will have to be made. Now, press conference dated May 13, 2020, wherein it is stated that all TDS and TCS provisions which are there will be deduction of 25% across the board, reduction of 25% across the board. So let's say professional fees, this TDS on professional fees 10%. Then from 14th of May till 31st of March 2021, you will have to pay, you will have to deduct tax at source at the rate of 7.5% and not 10%. But be careful, rates and manner of TDS for salaried employees has remain unchanged. Same way, payment to non-resident remains unchanged. It remains the same. You'll have to deduct tax at the rate of 10% or 20% as the case may be. Same way, there is no reduction there because it is applicable only for residents, and that too from 14th May to so any contract which you entered into before 13th May, you'll have to deduct tax on the old rates and not on the new rates. Okay. And one more thing, if you refer to the press release does not cover the LRS 206C1G. So I don't know whether it is accidental omission or deliberate omission as the case may be, but as of now the press release does not carry the LRS this thing. So LRS 5% which is there, uska 25% reduction press release does not contain. So maybe we'll have to wait what exactly clarification comes or not, we'll have to see. Next week, charitable trust. Now we have around 10 minutes and I'll just try to complete within the time allotted. Charitable trust, the first amendment which has come is donation towards corpus by one trust to another. It was barred already. That was not treated as application of funds. Now that particular thing has been extended even to all the trusts, whether you are covered by 2023C or any other trust. If one trust is giving corpus donation to another trust, that will not be treated as application of fund. Okay. Trust is trust either to get registered under 12AA or 1023C or 1046. So multiple registrations are not permitted. Then 12, there is a provision for re-registration now with effect from 1st June. Okay, which says that existing trusts which are there, will have to get them re-registered under 12AB. Okay, within 3 months from the provision coming into force, that is August 31st, 2020. But now June 1, 2020 has been deferred to October 1, 2020. And now you'll have to get yourself re-registered by 31st December 2020. And 12AB registration will remain forced only for a 5-year period. So you'll have to reapply after a period of 5 years. Then a trust registered or re-registered under 12AB will have to reapply before 6 months from the end of 5 years. तो आज से 31st December को apply करते हैं, then by the time after 5 years, 6 months बाकी है, वहाँ you'll have to apply again for re-registration. Provisional registration under 12AB, I'm coming to what provisional registration is, will apply at least 6 months prior to expiry of the period of provisional registration, okay, within 6 months from the commencement of activities, whichever is earlier, and where trust adopted or undertaken modifications of objects. You make some amendment to your trust deed which is not in line with the original objects, then you'll have to apply within 30 days for re-registration. This is the provision. Okay. So existing trust already registered under section 12A or 12AA, they will be given straight registration without calling any document for any documentation for 5 years. No worries. Okay. Trust registered under 12AB, when you go next time, they will call for all the documents for proving genuineness and compliance requirements, and again the registration will be 5 years only. New trust, see, this is what I was trying to say. Provisional registration kisko milta hai? It will be available to a new trust. So let's say today you are applying for registration, or maybe after 1st October is the case, maybe you are applying for registration, then you will have to apply at least 1 month prior to commencement of the previous year relevant to assessment year from which registration is sought, and provisional registration will be given only for 3 years. Okay, then you will have to reapply within 6 months prior to the 3 years or commencement of activities, whichever is earlier. Let's say you commence your activity within a period of 6 months, then you'll have to apply for within 6 months for re-registration. Okay. And all the pending applications which are there with the DIT exemption today will now be considered under 12AB effective 1st October 2020. Now order for re-registration will be given in 3 months, mind you. Okay, so today let's say 34 you apply for registration on 1st of October, then within 3 months you will be given the order for 12AB registration. Now henceforth, whenever registration takes place, they will get 6 months for registering you or re-registering you, as the case may be. An order for provisional registration, any new trust that is going, unke liye within 1 month they will have to register. Okay, provisional registration has to be given. So basically, when the provisional registration is given, they are not in a position to tell you that you please submit the activities, etc. Even if you have not commenced the activities, yet you will be given the registration, provisional registration, which will last for 3 years. Okay, and within 3 years, if you are not able to prove that you are carrying on charitable activities, then you will be re-registered. Okay, and otherwise provisions for cancellation of registration are given, which I am not dealing with separately. There are audit provisions. The law was this way, that in case if a trust's income is more than the basic exemption limit, then the audit report in form 10B was to be given along with the return of income. Now they have provided that audit report will have to be given as by the specified date as given in 44AB. So typically your audit report will have to be given by 30th September itself. The return has to be filed by 30th September, 31st October. The audit has to be done by 30th September. Of course, because of this extension of due date, for this year, basically you can give the audit report by 31st October, and the return can be filed by 30th November. But otherwise, the due date for giving the report in this trust case is also 30th September only. Then the trusts are supposed to give periodical statements of donation. Now, of course, that has not been prescribed as yet. But now, like TDS, the trusts will also have to give periodical statements of donation received, file details of donors, pre-filled, and those details will be pre-filled in the 26A's kind of a statement of the donors. So unless and until this amount is pre-filled in your return of income, you will not get the deduction of deduction under section 80G. This is what the provision is. Okay, this is the scheme of fact. So in case if you give donation, you will have to ensure that that trust is actually uploading those statements, and then only you will be getting a deduction under section 80G. Now even 80G, the re-registration process has been given. It is on the same line as 12AB. So I'm not repeating those things. This presentation anyways I'll be sharing with the organizers, and this will be given, but it is copy to copy. Whatever are the provisions for 12AB are there with 80G. So for 80G also only 5 years are given to you. Then you will have to re-register yourself. And the same way, in case if you are a new trust, then you will be given provisional registration for 3 years only, and that registration will have to be given within 1 month from the application. Okay, and 80G will remain valid for 5 years, and then you re-register this. So same provision, I'm not repeating. So with this, we come to the last part of 44AD, presumptive taxation. We have it's 6:29. I know I'll just take maximum 5 to 7 minutes of yours to deal with presumptive taxation. I'm not dealing with entire presumptive taxation scheme, but basically if 44AD, in case if your turnover is more than 1 crore rupees up to 2 crore rupees, okay, or rather let's say your turnover is less than 1 crore rupees also, then also you have to deduct, you have to offer 8% or 6% as the case may be. We all know all these provisions. Basically 44AD provisions are applicable to resident individual firms and HUF, but LLPs are out. In case if you are having a claim under section 10A, 10AA, 10B, 10BA, or income based deduction under chapter 6A, then also you are out of the scheme under 44AD. Okay, so if you have turnover of more than 2 crore rupees, you are out of the scheme of 44AD. Up to 2 crore only you are supposed to go for 44AD, not otherwise. In case if you are a professional, then you are covered by 44ADA, and if you are a transport operator, then you are covered by 44AE. If you are in business of earning income from commission, brokerage, agency business as the case may be, then also you are not covered by 44AD. Okay. And the manner is you'll have to offer 6% of turnover, or in case if you have everything by check payment, or otherwise 8% as the case may be. Okay, and this is what it is, that in case if you offer more than 8% of income, then you are covered by 44AD, and you are not liable to the audit under section 44AB. Okay, if you are offering less than 8% or 6% as the case may be, then you may have to get your accounts audited. And in case if your income is less than basic exemption limit, that is 2.5 lakh rupees, in that case, even if you are not offering 6%, yet you are not covered by the provisions of 44AD. Okay, and section all these deductions will be deemed to be allowed, we all know. Okay, opting out, in case if you opt out, what happens? I have taken that, but I'm not dealing with those provisions per se right now, because these are old provisions. So now I'm coming to the last part of 44AD. Because of the change in limit, what's happening is, let's say your turnover is more than 1 crore rupees, okay, but is less than 5 crore rupees. Okay, so now typically what happens is that, let's say we are more than 1 crore rupees, less than 2 crore rupees, then up to if you offer 6% income or 8% income as the case may be, then you don't have to get your accounts audited typically. Okay, that is the law, because of the section 44AB, which states that in case if a person is carrying on business, is having turnover of more than turnover exceeding 1 crore rupees, okay, provided that aggregate of all amounts received is means on sales side your cash sales are less than 5%, and on expense side your cash expenses are less than 5%, then instead of 1 crore it will be 5 crore rupees. Okay, then B, carrying on profession, If in case if your gross receipts are more than 50 lakhs, in case if you are transport operator, then that particular thing. In case if you are carrying on profession, and if you are showing income, if your receipts are more than less than 50 lakh rupees, and if you don't show more than 50% of your receipts, then it will be covered by 44 ABD. So you'll have to get your accounts audited. The last part is, in case if you are carrying on business, shall if the provisions of subsection 4 of 44 AD are applicable in his case, and his income exceeds maximum amount which is not chargeable to income tax, get his accounts audited of the previous year by an accountant before the specified date and furnished by that report in the prescribed form and prescribed manner, provided that this section shall not apply to person who declares profits and gains of the previous year in accordance with 44 AD1, and his turnover sales, as the case may be, does not exceed 2 crore rupees in such previous year. Okay, so now we have a case where, in case if I'm having turnover less than 1 crore rupees, if I show more than 8% or 6%, I don't have to get my accounts audited. Even if I have a position of I have turnover less than 2 crore rupees, and if I show more than 6% or 8%, I don't have to get my accounts audited. Now the issue is that, let's say my turnover is 4.5 crore rupees, that is, which is less than 5 crore rupees. Now 6% of 4.5 crore works out to 27 lakhs. But I'm offering profit of 20 lakh rupees. In that case, should I get my accounts audited or not? Now, if you refer to the proviso here, which says that this provision will apply only to 2 crore rupees. So once I cross 5 crore, once I cross 2 crore rupees, if I cross 2 crore rupees, and if I show less than 6%, which I should have otherwise shown 27 lakhs, I'm showing only 20 lakh rupees. Yet, in my view, you don't have to get your accounts audited. Now, let us take another example. You offer net profit of 11 lakh rupees only, which is less than 6% of 2 crore. अगर मेरा टर्नओवर 2 करोड़ होता तो मेरे को 12 लाख रुपए का इनकम तो दिखाना पड़ता था. Okay, but I am more than 2 crore rupees and I am showing income of 11 lakh rupees, which is actually less than 6% of 2 crore rupees. This has no otherwise relevance. We don't compare this 2 crore rupees with 5 crore rupees. What I'm trying to say is, if I'm showing substantially less income, but since my turnover is larger than 2 crore rupees, even if I show 11 lakh rupees as my net profit, yet to my mind I am not covered by the audit under 44 AB, because I am having turnover exceeding 4.5 crore, means 2 crore rupees. Another thing that has come into effect is the specified date. Okay, specified date in relation to accounts of the SSC of the previous year 11-2 assessment year means due date of furnishing return under 139. But now they've made it clear that in case the specified date will be one date 1 month prior to the due date. So let's say if your due date of filing return is October 31st, then you'll have to file your you'll have to get your accounts audited and file the tax audit report by September 30th. And now, since the due date of filing return is November 30th, you'll have to get your accounts audited by October 31st. Okay, so now the press release, which has been press conference, which was October 30th, 2020, due date for all income tax returns across the board, whether it is 31st July or the 31st October, has been deferred to 30th November, and accordingly the tax audit date now, instead of 30th September 20, is 31st October 2020. So that is the main change as far as presumptive taxation and the 44 AB are concerned. So with this, I complete my presentation. We cannot solve all problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. In case if I'm not able to come up to your expectation, you wanted me to speak something which I have not been able to speak, or I spoke something which you did not want, as the case may be. I seek your forgiveness. I love you all. Thank you so much. In fact, I'm not able to hear any voice from Charve, your side, so I'll just check in case if there are any queries. Otherwise, I'll sign off.
Hello.
Yeah, there are a few queries sent by Charvik. There are mixed views on the point, on this point. Wanted some clarity from you. Is LLP liable to deduct tax on interest on loan and capital from partners under 194A? The answer is the provision is the issue is a firm is an LLP liable to deduct tax on the interest paid to partners under 194A? If you refer to actually the provisions of 194A subsection 3, then any payment made to a partner is exempted. Now LLP is taxed as a firm, okay, and since LLP is taxed as a firm under the Income Tax Act 1961, the provisions of 194A would also apply to LLP, and accordingly LLP need not deduct tax on the payments made to partners on account of interest, in my view. Next is, please let me know the difference between technical professional fee and professional fee. It is not technical professional fee, basically it is technical services fee. It is not technical professional fee. Okay, so either the fees can be technical services fee or or professional fee. So if it is technical services fee, the TDS applicable is 2%. If it is a professional fee, then then 10% is applicable. Then can trust be registered under MSME Act? Yes, the trust can, in case if the trust is carrying on business, in that case the trust can also be an enterprise. Of course, it is not concerned with the relevant provisions of this, but yes, as far as I understand, even a trader or a manufacturer or a trust, so long as you are into business, you are in kind of business, you can be registered under MSME law. Whether future and options are covered by 44AD, I have not taken that particular thing right now in this talk, but there are a few decisions of Honorable Mumbai ITAT wherein future and future option transactions are not covered by 44AD, and accordingly, even if you have means there is no turnover, basically it is grow more case is there, and one more case is there. I'm not remembering right now, but I have that in that case law. In case if you wish, I'll share that case law with you. But there, in case future and options, the Honorable ITAT has held that the turnover is not capable of being calculated in this case of future and options, and accordingly there is no turnover. And since there is no turnover, 44AD provisions cannot be made applicable to this. I'll share those decisions with you. Then due dates are extended. What happens to interest under section 234? As of today, they have not in since the due earlier till last year 234A they used to charge 234A because we were seeking the extension. But this year, to my mind, 234A will not be applicable till 31st of October, 30th November rather, because it is the government who has done who has extended the period. So 234A to my mind will not be applicable till 30th November. What is the definition of goods for applicability of TCS? Will purchase and redemption of securities be covered? I'll have to think over this because I really do. I have not given it a thought honestly. Basically, goods, shares, and securities are not in a way goods for the purpose of this. And one more thing is ultimately, in case if I'm selling across the stock exchange, okay, in that case there is a broker in between, okay, and to my mind the provisions of this will TCS would not be attracted, but yet I'll have to think on this, okay. 99.99% TCS provision will not be applicable to security transaction, okay. Whether all IT services can be treated as technical services, You all IT services, like so long as it is not in nature of professional services. But IT, I would say IT means information technology, not income tax services. Information technology services can be treated as technical services. Okay, and 2% TDS could be applicable, but yet you'll have to actually look at the substance of the transaction and decide whether it is technical services fee or professional services fee. If it is a professional services fee, then 10%. Foreign tour package should be ticketing plus hotel booking and sightseeing, or if a client does only hotel booking of foreign, would TDS still be collected? 1 minute, I need to understand. Foreign tour package should be ticketing plus hotel booking and sightseeing, or if client does only hotel booking of foreign TDS. See, basically whatever amount that you pay to the tour operator, let's say if you are booking only hotels from the hotel from the tour operator, then on the ticket tour operator will not collect tax. So let's say you are paying 5 lakh rupees, then on 5 lakh rupees they will collect tax. Now 5 lakh rupees could be comprising of ticket plus hotel plus sightseeing, or only hotel and sightseeing, or only hotel, as the case may be. So in case if the ticket is on your head and sightseeing is also on your head, then you don't have to give the tax to the tour operator on those elements for which you are not paying. Then please give an example of e-commerce services in connection with sale of goods or services if commission is not covered. If e-commerce services, yeah, I told you, let's say I'm a chartered accountant, I'm hosting my services on the portal, okay, of of Amazon for advisory, okay, or I'm an engineer, as the case may be, or I'm an interior designer, and my services are hosted on the website, and my services are bought from the website. Okay, the person is contacting me through website, and the contract has the deal has happened. So any professional fee that is covered, that is facilitated by the e-commerce operator to the e-commerce participant, would be covered. So it's not commission but a professional fee of a chartered accountant. If a chartered accountant is permitted to render service from the e-commerce from Amazon.in or say that kind of e-commerce operator, then such professional fees services would be treated as the services within the meaning of that section, and accordingly the provisions of TCS or TDS would be applicable. So are there any other queries? Charvik, I'm not able to hear you. You may just tell me on WhatsApp. Charvik.
Hello. Sir,
Okay,
there is one
Charvik.
more.
So can I sign off?
Sir, this is Raj Khona here. Sir, there is one query from our participant whether
Okay,
IT
I'm not
services
able to
such
hear
as
anything from you guys. Organizers, thank you so much. Ghanshyam Bhai
Hello?
Lalka, Charvik, and other co-organizers and all the participants. I'm really grateful to you all for giving this opportunity to share my views on the subject. Thank you so much. Much in gratitude
Hello?
towards you all. Thank you.
Hello?
Bhai,
Hello?
Mehul bhai,
Hello?
Mehul bhai.
Sir, you can just hear one more question. The phone is on speaker. You might be able to hear.
Yeah.
Yes, Raj.
So there is one question whether IT services such as repairs and AMC services can be treated as technical services.
Charvik, can you repeat, please? I'm not able to hear him.
Yeah, whether IT services such as repairs and AMC can be treated as technical.
Yeah, it is. That is why I shared those I shared those case flows. So if it is a works contract kind of a service, okay, wherein basically some work is being done, okay, and material is also involved, and it's a contract of annual maintenance, okay. Then such annual maintenance contracts will now be treated as the technical services and not professional services, and accordingly 2% TDS would be applicable for all such services. Okay. Yes, Arvik. Anything else?
Hello.
Mehul bhai, am I audible?
Arvik?
Yeah, one second.
Hello.
Raj, any
Arvik, am I
other?
audible?
Yeah, I am also, sir. Sir, I think Mehul Bhai's speaker is on mute, I think.
Acha. Can you just tell him on the
He
phone?
might, therefore he is not, maybe able to hear us.
Thanks.
So I just want to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the association to CA Mehul Shah for his expert analysis on the topic. Recent amendments under TDS, TCS, charitable trust, tax audit, presumptive taxation. Sir, your presentation was very lucid, informative, and thorough. We sincerely thank you for accepting our invitation to speak on this topic for the members of this association at a very short notice. The participants have benefited, extremely benefited from your expert analysis, wisdom, and knowledge. I think you have thoroughly covered the topic in pith and substance. Everything has been covered, and this can be rightly seen from the constant attendance during the webinar. It was more than 60 participants, which is the highest till the of the 6 webinars we have conducted in this lockdown period. We look forward to your of your experience, knowledge in future meetings and webinars also, sir. Thank you so much for this talk. Some announcements I would like to make with regard to the upcoming webinar. On the Wednesday, we have a webinar by Ravi Dharamsi, who is from ValueQuest. He will be speaking on the topic Art of Investing. So this will be like creating basically those people who are enthusiastic about stock markets, investing, and who are looking for value creation, value investments, etc. So this is an interesting topic. I request all the participants to join the webinar and take the benefit of this session. Once again, I thank everyone for this for joining this webinar, and thank Mehul Bhai for his expert and very informative session. Thank you so much all for joining.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Arvik, I'm signing off, Arvik. Thanks. Thank you.